Today, we're going to dive into the incredible story of a man whose family journeyed west across the Atlantic, only for him to take that same faith and go east, all the way across the Pacific Ocean into a world that was completely, utterly different from his own.
I mean, think about that jump for a second. We're not just talking about miles on a map, we're talking about a leap between entire civilizations. This story kicks off in South Carolina, right after the Civil War, and lands smack in the middle of the ancient, complex world of 19th century imperial China. And that wild contrast? Well, that's what makes this so fascinating.
All right, let's start at the beginning, with the decision that changed everything. Who was this guy? And what on earth could make him pack up and leave every single thing he knew for a new life on the literal other side of the planet?
So the man we're talking about is Hampton Coit DuBose. And yeah, he was a missionary and he wrote a lot of books, but he became so much more than that. He ended up being a really passionate social reformer who made a huge impact on his new home.
To really get why he did what he did, you have to picture the world he came from. He was born in 1845, so he grew up right in the middle of the American Civil War and all the chaos of Reconstruction that came after. His own country was just trying to piece itself back together, and yet, in 1872, he decides, nope, I'm leaving, and gets on a boat to China.
So what was the engine behind a move that big? Well, it all came down to his upbringing. His dad was a minister, so Hampton grew up in a house where faith was just everything. It was the air they breathed. And that deep conviction gave him this powerful feeling that he needed to take his message as far as it could possibly go.
Okay, so, Section 2, A New World. He crosses the Pacific, and DuBose finally arrives in the city that would be his home for pretty much the rest of his life, Suzhou, China.
You know, it's almost impossible for us to imagine the kind of culture shock he must have felt. Seriously, for a young guy from South Carolina in the 1870s, showing up in China wasn't just like visiting a foreign country. It was like landing on another planet, a civilization with thousands of years of its own history and traditions that were completely alien to him.
And the place he settled, Suzhou, was famous for being absolutely beautiful. They called it the Venice of the East because of all its amazing canals and gardens. But no matter how pretty it was still a deeply unfamiliar and, I'm sure, very challenging place for a guy from the West.
40 years. Let that sink in for a second. That's how long DuBose dedicated himself to his mission in China. For almost 4 decades, he dove headfirst into the language and the culture, and he preached in Chinese almost every single day. That level of dedication is just, wow, it's staggering.
And you know, that kind of commitment gets noticed. He wasn't just some foreigner passing through. He became such a part of the Suzhou community that many of the local people just knew him by his Chinese name, DuBose. That really tells you how much he became one of them.
But he wasn't just talking to people face to face. DuBose was also a writer, a really busy one. He wrote a ton of books and little pamphlets, all in Chinese. This was huge, because it meant his message could travel way beyond just the people he could speak to in person.
But his story doesn't stop there. This is where things get really intense, where his mission grows from just preaching into this all-out social crusade against one of the biggest problems facing China at the time.
Pretty soon, his work took on a whole new shape. He ran into a problem that was so destructive, so terrible, that he knew he just couldn't stay quiet. So what was this massive societal evil that basically forced him to become a reformer?
That evil was the opium crisis. He called it, in his own words, a soul and body killing evil. He was there on the ground seeing with his own eyes how this addiction, which was being pushed by foreign trade, was just tearing China apart, destroying lives, families, whole communities. And he didn't just talk about how bad it was, he actually did something. He became a major leader in one of China's very first anti-opium movements. He fought back hard, writing fiery articles, giving these powerful speeches, and even organizing anti-opium groups to fight the crisis. To DuBose, this wasn't some side gig. It was part of his mission. He believed you couldn't just talk about saving souls in the afterlife. You had to fight the real, concrete evils that were causing so much pain to people right here and now. And that crusade, it earned him a massive amount of respect from everyone, both Westerners and Chinese people.
So after 40 years in China, what did it all amount to? What did this one incredible life leave behind? Well, in our last section here, we're going to look at his legacy, both in the city he loved and inside his own family.
When Hampton Coit DuBose died in 1910,
He wasn't mourned in Suzhou as some outsider. No way. He was mourned as one of their own, a respected figure who had given his entire adult life to helping the people he had come to serve. But maybe the most powerful part of his legacy is what he inspired in his own kids. I mean, they saw what their dad did, and it moved them so much that several of them also became missionaries. They created this amazing multi-generational legacy of service to China that went on long after he was gone.
And this is where the whole story just comes beautifully full circle. You see, 5 generations before, his ancestor, Isaac DuBose, crossed the Atlantic Ocean to build a life for his family. And then, all those years later, Hampton takes that very same faith and crosses the Pacific Ocean, not for himself, but to give his life in service to others. It's just incredible.
So this whole story leaves us with a pretty big question to think about. Hampton DuBose's journey from South Carolina to Suzhou was way more than just a long boat trip. It was a life built on deep conviction and service. And it really makes you stop and ask yourself, what does it really mean to dedicate your one and only life to a world, a culture, and a people that are not your own?